Well, I am thrilled to bring a wonderful guest to you today, the author of Break Through the Limits of the Brain by Joseph Selbie. And he is with me today. Wonderful book and fascinating. I think my audience knows how much I really get excited about neuroscience and the blending of neuroscience and spirituality. And this gentleman has done it, and I've been reading it and it's fascinating. So let's find out a little bit more about you, Joseph. Tell a little bit about how you got into this kind of philosophy and what's been going on in your life.
Well, it sort of all started in college with an amazing hallucinogenic experience that I had that just made me feel absolutely wonderful. It made me feel the presence of spirit. It was moving. It was everything I wanted to be and perceive. And that set me step by step inexorably toward meditation and embracing a spiritual path of Paramahansa Yogananda, author of the Autobiography of a Yogi. And then that led me to becoming part of Ananda, which is both residential communities and a kind of a spiritual movement all over the world at this point.
Hmm.
And that became the heart of my life. But at the same time, I was always very grounded in science. And I could see in many classes I taught and many conversations I would have that people really wanted to see how science could support spirituality. And that for some people, their conviction that science did not support spirituality really kept them from embracing it. And I thought this was such a shame because there's so much gain to experiencing spirit that you can have through meditation that can transform your life. And yet many people were just unable to embrace it. Many people still are, obviously, unable to embrace it because of that. So I really felt that there was a strong, clear intersection between science and spirituality. And that if people just understood that there are discoveries and then there are interpretations of what those discoveries mean. And one set of interpretations about scientific discoveries is very materialistic, but there are equally valid interpretations of those discoveries that point to deeper realities, that point to consciousness, that point to all of us having a greater reality than the one that's presented to us just day in, day out by the senses. So that really inspired me to try to reach people. And that's been kind of the theme running through my life, running through my classes, running through my work, and clearly running through my books.
And then you got into technology and the internet and how did that kind of blend in when you started that company?
Well, that was, as the old saying goes, that invention, is the created by necessity.
Right,
And my necessity was 4 children, and I needed to support them. I live in a spiritual community that has work, but it rarely pays enough to raise 4 children. So I was always fascinated from early days by the internet, and it was a natural fit for me to provide support to companies in that space. And so that grew a business called TriStream. TriStream is no longer around, but it served me well, and it served many others. We had as many as 40 people working in the company at one point. But I loved it. It was kind of a roller coaster ride. So I
Yeah,
went up on the boom and down
yeah,
on the bust.
yeah,
But
yeah.
even after the dot-com bust, we found a new groove helping companies that needed their applications redesigned for their
Mhm,
employees or for their
mhm,
customers.
mhm.
And that went on for many years, quite enjoyably.
But what we're talking about today with your new book, Break Through the Limits of the Brain, we're really getting into your passion, aren't we?
Yes, this is that intersection between science and religion,
Yes,
as neuroscience
yeah,
has revealed that intersection very, very powerfully. I mean, a lot of the establishment of meditation across the United States and the Western world has come about through neuroscience making deep studies of the effects of meditation.
right.
And they're very powerfully confirming what the spiritual tradition of meditation has had to say that it will do for us. It'll
Yes,
rewire the brain. It will support spiritual perception. It will concentrate the mind. It'll improve the health. All these are the claims of spiritual traditions, and neuroscience is saying exactly the same thing.
yes. I remember when I learned meditation in 1968 back in Madison, Wisconsin, and I would listen to the Maharishi. We would have his videos, and he would say all this stuff. But people were thinking, oh, that's woo woo, that's India, that's this or that. However, at the same time, Harvard was doing research
Yeah.
on how it affected the heart, it affected the brain. And so I thought that was fascinating. I was learning that at that time, which was so many years ago. But now it's become more mainstream. People don't think of it so much as woo woo. We're having companies learning meditation, and I teach it to lawyers for continuing education. So, I teach them the benefits of doing mindfulness and meditation. So, we've come a long way, baby, haven't we? In
We
terms
have come a long way. I think it was important for some people that meditation became secularized.
yes,
The sort of spiritual trappings of meditation were off-putting to some, but I think it's fascinating, perhaps ironic, that the people who get into it in a secular way often rediscover the spiritual side of it that was there all along. But
yes,
it's a direct experience rather than requiring any kind of
religion or
belief
dogma.
system
Yeah,
or
yeah.
anything
It's
beforehand.
really your connection, oneness with everything. So
Yes.
I know I remember just recently I was reading more about Albert Einstein, who people would say he was an atheist. He was not. He was not an atheist. And
Not at
he
all.
no, and he would meditate in his own way to come up with creative ideas. It was his own form of meditation. And he said there is something, the space between the atoms. And so yeah, I think it would be a lot healthier in our crazy world right now. We're connected by the internet that you worked so hard on, right? We're
Yeah.
connected, but we're disconnected. And I think the key to connection is really being able to be one with yourself and then one with others. So that's why I really loved your book. I love all the examples that you give in here of people having extraordinary experiences. And that's why I think it's such a great book for people to read, Break Through the Limits of the Brain. And I think people will be able to relate when we're talking about the science of mysticism. It's like Joe Dispenza says that, science is the new language of mysticism, which I think it's great that you're getting onto that, and Mark Waldman, and you have a wonderful forward by Andy Newberg, who's been on my show a couple times. So I'm so thrilled to be able to speak with you and others that are in this space that I am a student of. And so I am grateful about that.
Well, you live in that space too. If you've been
Yeah, I
meditating
live in
since
this and I use it.
1968,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. And I use it in a different way. I use it as a mediator, as one who is there to heal conflict. So I use the tools in my own little way that I hope really helps other people and helps them to get beyond what's going on in their crazy brain and getting connected to what's really important, which
Yeah.
is what is it that they really need. They don't need all that money, or they don't need revenge. They really need to express what's going on in their heart and soul. And so, but you
Yes.
have
Well,
to get
people are
them
helped
out of
one
that.
at a time.
Yeah, you have to just get them out of that uh, outside world a little bit to recognize. I think so much many of us um, really look at the outside world rather the inside world. What do you think about that?
Well, we've wired our brains to do that. And
Yes.
that's really the premise of the book, Break Through the Limits of the Brain, is
Yes.
that we created our own limitations. And we were encouraged to do so because everyone around us had those same perceptual limitations, those same interactive limitations. So it's fascinating to me that when we are born, we have almost no voluntary control over our bodies. Our
Mm,
body's involuntary nervous system is active. It keeps everything regulated, the heart beating, the
mhm,
lungs bringing in air, kidney function, all the functions that keep the body itself operating as an organism.
right,
Yet when we're born, we can't do anything with it. And
right,
so we start creating neural circuits as we start to learn to move our body, as we learn to crawl, as we learn to walk, talk, understand speech of others. And those neural circuits are essential for our being able to operate in the world that we know.
right.
But many children, many young children, also were simultaneously aware of more subtle realities. There are many, many children who saw angels when they were quite young, or would see um, subtle astral light in or amongst the regular perceptions they had of this world gained through the senses. But
Right.
most children are talked out of those perceptions.
Mhm.
They're not encouraged or supported by the people around them. And gradually, those experiences fade into childhood memories. And the real support that their brain is giving them, because of their own wiring of their brain, is to operate in a sensory world.
Right.
And it's the sensory world that most of us know. When we get up, the brain starts firing. We start doing our morning habits. We start thinking about the day ahead. We operate in that mode all the way until it's time to go to sleep. And then we start it over the next day. I liken it to having a fireworks show in your brain, that the first stimulus of the day, whatever that might be, the alarm clock going off, um, or light coming into the eyes, or some smell,
Right.
triggers um, these neural circuits that get our bodies moving and behaving and doing and uh, operating various behaviors. And that just keeps being stimulated and stimulated and stimulated, like firecrackers in a woven chain of firecrackers. They just keep going off
Mm,
and off. And
mhm.
then we have these big booms of thoughts, starbursts of thoughts in our brain, starbursts of emotions in our being. And we go through that all day long, and then we go to bed.
Yeah.
But there is another reality that we may have been aware of as children that has been edged out by this fireworks show, this
Mm,
distraction of continuously operating in the physical world, that we can rewire our brains to experience. And that's where the breakthrough comes. Meditation is the key technique for rewiring the brain, but meditation is not an end in of itself. Just meditating is not the purpose of meditation. The purpose of meditation is to connect us with those deeper realities, to connect us with what is sometimes known as superconsciousness. So our conscious mind is the experience we have when we operate through the physical body, through the senses, and everything that we perceive in that manner and react to in that manner. All that creates conscious awareness or conscious
Yeah,
mind.
that's the outer world. Yeah.
It's the outer world, and our mind is inner, but it's focused on the outer, and that's what
Right.
defines the conscious mind.
Right. Right.
But we can break through into superconscious awareness. And I like the term superconscious because it implies that it's just an extension of our conscious mind. It's
Mm,
not something radically different. We don't suddenly become superconscious. Rather, we become aware by degrees, expanding degrees of these more subtle realities. And those are feeling peaceful in the midst of activity. It's having your heart open and feeling love towards other people in the midst of challenging circumstances.
mhm.
It most readily is experienced as just feeling happier, feeling joy, feeling a sense of fulfillment, even when perhaps your goals in life are still very actively being pursued. Instead of always waiting for some goal to be achieved to feel fulfilled, you
Right.
can feel that sense of fulfillment uh, anytime and in any circumstances if you start to tap into that greater reality that is
Mhm.
you.
Right. And for me, when I'm in the midst of chaos or I'm in the midst of people who are very angry and their energy is difficult, that mindfulness, whether I'm meditating in the morning before I go to work or when I can just do my deep breathing, it gives me serenity, you know, because the emotions, all emotions are so contagious. And those emotions of anger and hostility and frustration, those are very powerful emotions. And they're very, they're worse than COVID as far as being contagious, right? They're
Yeah.
terrible.
Oh, yeah. No, they run around the world almost instantly, courtesy of the internet.
Yes. The internet's supposed to bring us together, but it also does that. But people don't always recognize that the other types of emotions of, like you say, gratitude and peace and love and serenity and all those emotions of feeling good and joy, that those also can be contagious, right?
Oh, yes. Just as contagious, just as readily contagious, but uh, they don't tend to be the main topic of news programs or conversations or anything going on in the continuous 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah.
So they tend to be drowned out.
Right.
But even in the midst of that, each one of us as an individual can choose to find that experience. And then just naturally, you don't have to become a evangelist for your feelings.
Right.
Just naturally, your feelings spread to others by uh, their connection to you.
Right. So let me ask you a little bit about meditation for those people who are, say, I can't meditate. People will say to me, I can't meditate because I have a monkey mind. Okay. And so let's talk about what that means. And when thoughts come in, right? When we're meditating, no matter what. So why don't you talk? I'm sure from all the teaching you've done of meditation that people say this kind of stuff to you, right?
Over and over and over. Yes. And, people who say they can't meditate are right, but they're wrong in the sense that they could learn to meditate.
Right.
No one expects to be able to play tennis if they've never played tennis.
And it takes
No,
practice, right?
Yeah, you just have to dive in and start doing it. So the reality is that when you sit down to meditate, you're not going to be very good at it to begin with, unless you are an unusual being who has, in a sense, already had a very meditative consciousness in their life and
Mhm.
embrace meditation, um, you know, having already experienced some of that subtle joy. But for most of us, we're sitting down to meditate without any support for it, either mentally or emotionally or physically.
Mhm.
But those things can come. What I say to people is don't expect to be really good at it to begin with. You know, if you went out onto the tennis court and you wanted to play like Serena Williams, your first day, you're going to be very disappointed,
Yeah, you're
right?
not going to be Serena Williams.
Right. Except maybe in that you want to smash your racket. Maybe that's the part of Serena Williams you can be. Um, but so, what I encourage people to do is just be realistic and make meditation something that is the kernel of time for you to calm down
Right,
and relax.
right, right.
And that even if you don't find the monkey mind stopping, even if it slows down, you should feel a sense of release. And to
Yes.
begin with, that sense of release might go away the moment you step out of your meditation chair or
Right,
wherever you
right,
meditate. But at least you have a toehold of some meditative experience
right.
and just
Just
stay
being
with it.
aware also when those crazy thoughts come in, I just remember just going through this with, many, many years ago, and even remembering, even now, I'll sit down, let's say I'm having a really busy morning that I'm maybe worried about, and I sit down to meditate, thoughts will come in, and then I just kind of let them flow back out.
Right.
Okay, as soon as I'm aware that a thought came in, I go, oh, I can think about that later. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to be perfect, even though I've been doing it like 50 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are techniques that can help. And being able to watch your thoughts come and go is, kind of a very useful baseline approach to meditation. But you can also use the mind's tendency to want to think about something, to want to be focused on something to your advantage. And that is the heart of um, the technique that I use called the hung saw technique. So, the hung saw technique, very simply explained, is that you deliberately watch the breath,
Mhm.
and as it comes in, you mentally say hung. And as the breath goes out, you mentally say saw. And you
Mhm.
let that mental, saying of those words to be drawn out to fit the length of your inhalation or the length of your exhalation.
Right. And
And
people,
your mind will run away from that and you'll forget you're doing it. But if you just keep bringing it back to that, what you will find is that the thoughts subside naturally because you're concentrated on a single thing, your breath,
right, right,
rather than just allowing random thoughts to come and go.
right.
And the Hung Saw technique is known as a concentration technique because it will naturally bring your focus to the point between the eyebrows, which
Mm,
is the seat of concentration
right, right there.
that is said to exist by yogis and other meditators, but it's also now shown to be the seat of concentration by neuroscience. That when you concentrate at the point between the eyebrows, it will cause the frontal cortex of the brain to light up and focus, and will simultaneously cause other areas of the brain to subside. So the impulse to move or fidget or adjust your position will gradually lessen
Dissipate,
as
right.
your forebrain becomes more and more activated by that concentration. So I really recommend the Hung Saw technique. It's available on my website, which you can
Let's
get to.
give your website as well right now. Can we say
So
it?
it's josephselbie.com.
Mhm.
And the spelling of Selbie is unusual. It's Selbie rather than BY, which is the more common
Yep.
spelling.
Trying to-
So that's Selbie, josephselbie.com.
Mhm.
And you can find not only the Hung Saw technique itself, but help, neuroscientific help in how to establish a good meditation experience and how to really help the brain build those circuits so that you get support for your meditation the most quickly and the most long lastingly. So you can find that on my website. But I would recommend to anybody, whether you embrace Hung Saw or any other technique, the most important thing that meditation can do for you is if you meditate.
Right. It helps.
you just
Yeah,
you
and I
have to do it,
I have a mantra that I was given, so
right?
many years ago that is my area of focus as well. And thank goodness I've got that because it's something for me to focus. And of course, I've done the breath work one too. And depending on what's going on in my life, I just don't get up. And so I had a question about that. I was told that it should be, when I learned it, and I keep doing it, is I set my timer for 21 minutes. That is works for me. So what is it that you suggest for a time that really is probably most beneficial?
That's really hard to answer because it really depends on how well you're doing at the meditation yourself.
Mm,
So I try not to stress length. More, what I will say to people is that if you just concentrate on being present,
mhm,
then you will naturally extend the amount of time you spend. And that you'll really find it more of a limitation to have 20 minutes or 15 minutes or 10 minutes than a goal. If you
mhm.
just get yourself to liking the experience and to having the experience that is pleasant and calming and wonderful. And then you'll find the whatever time you can in your schedule to meditate. But just be present, just
Mhm.
meditate, approach it as if it were the single most important thing you needed to do in your life at this point in time, which it is.
Yeah.
And it will naturally expand into the amount of time that fits your circumstances.
Right. Mark Waldman and I were talking recently, and he was talking about even just a couple minutes,
Yeah,
like when things are stressful. And I do that when I find that I'm under a lot of stress, maybe with very conflictual people in my mediation. I will just take a break, and even if it's only for just a couple minutes, to get my brain back into that calm state. So when I come back, I'm totally refreshed, because we were just talking about emotions are so strong. And when people are angry, that I have to put up my golden shields.
yeah,
Yeah, but I get frustrated sometimes and I have to take myself back. So even a minute or 2 minutes,
right,
any period of time. And I think that's important because people will think, well, I don't have the time, and I go,
right.
well, it could just be for a minute, you
Yeah,
know?
just start with something. Do some deep breathing, do some sort of meditation technique, even if it's, as you say, 2 minutes. The other thing that I like to stress about meditation is that the benefits don't end at the end of your meditation time.
Right.
And Yogananda, whose teachings I follow, author of the autobiography of a yogi,
Yeah.
um, he said that if you're feeling the benefits of meditation throughout your day in a very real way, you never stop meditating.
Mm,
That wanting to establish a new way of feeling and a new way of being focused in your life. And that is all the expansion, the natural expansion of what you first start to experience in meditation.
Right. And I think the other beauty of it is, besides feeling joy and feeling, serenity and all that, it really helps you with your creativity. They
Yeah,
talked about Tesla, right? Who he would like hold keys in his hands and then meditate. And if he dropped them, then he'd start again to make sure that that's how so many creative ideas came to him.
right.
And sometimes I will have a challenge that I'm thinking about. And before I go into meditation, I go, I want to have some insight, right? And then I'll
Right.
meditate, and a creative idea will come to me. Just, just kind of jump into my meditation or right afterward. So I think that's another beauty of,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. I mean, I use it very consciously in all of my writing.
Yes.
So I will often end a meditation with just asking for clarity on something. And
Mm,
I will then start to think about it, whatever it is. It's like priming the pump, that
yes.
I don't just get the gift of some, idea in gold letters
Right.
in the middle of my mind. So I just start thinking about what it is. Perhaps it's a passage in the book I know that I'm not sure which way to go with. Perhaps it's, yesterday's email that I wasn't quite sure how I should respond to.
Right.
And I'll just start thinking about it. And if I'm already calm and elevated and feeling the presence, then very quickly the ideas will clarify into one clear direction. And
Yes.
I really rely on that.
Yes. Yes.
I think that in many ways, as people like Einstein and Tesla say, I have not really written those books.
Yes.
I have opened myself up to receive ideas
They come through you.
that come through me, and then I'm the wordsmith that has to take those ideas and turn them into sentences and grammar and
Right.
and a logical order, etc. So I'm not trying to say that it's like automatic writing where it just comes
Right.
out and I don't have to do anything. There are people who
Sure.
do that. A remarkable
Right.
story about Brahms, the composer Brahms. He could actually put himself into a semi trance and he would get entire symphonies
Right.
coming into his brain. And as long as he could stay in that state and keep up with, you know,
Yeah.
writing the notes, he could capture an entire symphony. And he said it was note perfect the way it would come to him. So it's not
Amazing.
impossible
No.
that you
No.
can get that level of creativity. But for me, it's a mix of
Yeah.
my own uh, approach and thoughts and that inspiration and creativity coming to
And
me.
that interpretation too, how
Yeah.
you interpret it as well. Well, it's fascinating. I have one last question because it's about time to go. And, you say in your book that we always have one foot in heaven and one foot on earth. So, what do you mean by that?
Well, when near death experiencers have their experiences of being in heaven or being in luminous realms, they use terms that make sense to them from their own understanding. They
Right.
don't all call it the same thing, but
Right.
they describe it in the same way. They're in this luminous world. When they describe it, they also describe being in a body. They
Hmm.
describe themselves moving around and talking, using speech, and they see
Right.
other people who look embodied to them, even though they're beings of light, and even though
Right.
they are a being of light, they are aware that there is a form there.
Hmm.
And so that's our one foot in heaven. That when we die is the body we will instantly become aware of.
Mhm.
But when we're still operating in the physical world, we also have a physical body, but the two are dancing in perfect coordination.
Mm.
There's no separation between that luminous astral body and our physical body. But
Mm.
I think what people don't perhaps fully appreciate is how much influence the astral, the subtle aspects have on our everyday experience, because
Okay.
the astral body, the energy body, is where our thoughts originate. It's where
Mm.
our emotions originate. It's where our memories are stored. It's where our life force, our vitality comes from.
Right.
And so we're really more astral, even while we're operating in our physical body,
Mhm.
than we know. And so when we die, it's not some shocking surprise, because we have been operating through those aspects of ourselves our entire life without really understanding that they have nothing to do with the brain and the body, essentially.
Right.
The
Right.
brain and body respond to those realities and can even stimulate those realities, but they are forever beyond being purely physical. So
Mm.
we always have this wonderful dynamism going on, the one foot on earth, one foot in heaven, that if we didn't have our one foot in heaven, we would just die.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, it's not as if it's some other, relatively unused part of our being. It is the core of our being, and
Mm.
it's the body that can be non-essential, but not
Right.
the astral body.
Which is why it's so wonderful and it's so empowering, and insightful to actually tap into that,
Yeah,
because many of us are just living in that material world instead of going within, like you say, that it's like a whole garden that we can
yeah.
play in as well. And
And I
so that's
think
so beautiful.
it can sound judgmental to people to say you're living in the material world, but we're all living in the material world.
Yeah, we are.
It's where it's
We're
where
spiritual
our
beings having this human experience, as they
exactly,
say, right? Yeah.
exactly, and we're all doing it. So it's really a matter of, to what degree are we aware of
Right.
the part of us that exists beyond the
Yes.
physical, and to what degree are we aware of only those, experiences that happen through the senses and
Right.
operating in this physical world. So there's
Good.
nothing of judgment there.
No.
It's just science. If you meditate, you'll become more aware of your subtle half, or
Right.
greater than half. And
Right.
if you don't, then you'll pretty much be operating only in awareness of the physical part of your being.
Right. And you miss a part.
You
You,
miss a part, because
yeah.
that astral part of us is where happiness comes from. It's
Right.
where satisfaction comes from. It's where love comes from. It's
Right.
where everything that we aspire to have and to experience really comes from. I mean, the
Right.
only reason we want anything is because we think it will give us a feeling result.
Right.
But
Right.
all those feelings exist in the astral regions.
Right.
They
Right.
don't
Right.
exist here.
The joy that you're
And
talking
they're
about.
always reachable for us.
Right.
They are right there within us. I mean, a
Right.
lot of spiritual teachings just basically say, um, you're seeking, if you're a fish
Mm.
and you're thirsty, you're missing the point, right? That
Right. Yeah.
the everything around you will satisfy the thirst of happiness.
Right.
Everything within you will satisfy that thirst for happiness. But you have to take the time to be in it and
Right.
recognize it
Right.
and feel it.
Right. And
And
some
when you
people
do,
get
life is transformed.
right. And some people get through it with deep prayer, like
Yeah.
Mother Teresa. So it's that connection. It's that deep, deep connection with your higher power, God, whatever you want to call it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. You
And
feel it. You feel spirit. It's not a belief.
no, it's not a dogma. It's got to be a
It's
real connection. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
actually have that real connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so thrilled to have you join us today, and I am hoping that people will pick up this book on Amazon or wherever, Break Through the Limits of the Brain by Joseph Selbie. And Selbie is Selbie. And it's just josephselby.com, where you can get so much more information and link to his book as well. So thank you, Joseph, for joining us. And thank you for all the great work that you're doing with Break Through the Limits of the Brain.
Well,
So,
thank you very much. It's been a
yeah.
pleasure
And we'll
being able to
stay in
talk
touch.
about meditation with someone who's been a lifelong meditator.
Yeah. Yeah. Great to talk to you. You take care. Bye.